We've got apologies today from Karen, and again apologies for the fact that we had to change the date of this meeting at relatively short notice. We've tried now with great work from Eloise to set out the calendar for the next year so that everybody can plan ahead, and hopefully that will help. And also welcome to Priya, who's joining us online today. Can I just check before we get into the substance of the discussion whether anybody's got any new declarations of interest? This was an action that I took from the previous meeting to remember to ask you all. Any new declarations of interest? Just to say, we're going to be doing one of our regular updates of declarations of interest in the next few weeks, so we'll have done that before our next board meeting. Great. So the first substantive item is my chair's update, but before that, I'll just do a quick run through the business that we're going to be doing together today. So we'll be starting off our meeting with our regular reports, starting with Michael's, our case report, campaigns, comms and finance reports. Once we've sorted out the money, we'll take a quick break. And then we've got a couple of, then we'll be moving into private session. And that will be at around about 11:45. So before we move into that business, can I just check whether anybody on the board has any other business they want to raise that we should capture in the public session? Nope. Okay, let's crack on then. So first agenda item is the chair's report. I'll keep this reasonably brief. I can't believe it's been nearly 2 months now since I took up the role as chair. I'm enjoying it fantastically, and I'm really grateful for the support that I'm getting from you as board members, as well as from Michael and the members of the executive team. You've made my induction as easy as it possibly could be. So thank you very much, and I'm still very excited about what we can do together. I'm still 2 months in the process of going through some of my introductory meetings and some of my get to know you sessions. Particularly worth drawing out is I've got a session with Andy Lord at TfL next week. We had worked together before, but I'm looking forward to reacquainting myself with Andy. And maybe if any of you want to take a moment and share with me, if there's, I already have quite a long list of things to raise with him, starting with the central line. But if there are any particular things that you would like me to take that opportunity to draw his attention or to set out as a priority, then either tell me now or drop me a line separately. That would be absolutely fine. I'm also seeing Seb Dance a couple of weeks after that to talk to him. And then clearly we're now in the pre-election period for bits of London government, and we will be, once the elections are done, getting to know the new members of the Transport Committee and other political stakeholders in London. A couple of other quick things from me. I thought I might mention, I'm also, I think, on the board of Transport Focus. We had the Transport Focus board on Monday, and we discussed the Transport Focus business plan for next year, which was helpful context setting for our own business plan. I thought I might do a bit of a shout out though for the Transport Focus publication on buses, which they're tremendously proud of, and rightly so, on bus passenger satisfaction. That gave comparative information about bus passenger satisfaction in a range of urban and rural areas, and drew out some quite interesting findings about relative satisfaction between younger users and older users, and between people who are habitual bus travellers and occasional bus travellers. And as buses is a huge part of our work as well, there was some quite interesting compare and contrast with what's going on in buses in London. So I thought you might be interested in that, and to have that drawn to your attention. And then finally, and Michael may say more about this, I did a piece of my first in many years direct contact with journalists. I did an interview with the London Society. Alex and others were very helpful in preparing me. As a civil servant, you're not allowed to talk to journalists directly. They asked me, it was quite a good opportunity for me to get a brief on all the things that London TravelWatch cares about. And they asked me some very interesting questions around accessibility, around access to toilets, around customer information, but particularly around ageing infrastructure. And this relates to the issues that Michael has been raising with TfL on behalf of TravelWatch about the central line. and the timeliness of customer information and emergency timetabling. So that was a well-timed piece. I haven't seen it written up yet. I'll be interested to see what they make of my first baby steps into the world of journalism. And that was everything I was going to say on my chair's update. Any questions or comments on any of that? We good? Let's go straight to Michael then. Michael.
So.
Oh no, sorry, I've missed that. I missed that. Like, we can talk, but there's some other things we have to do first, aren't there? So we have the minutes and the matters arising from our last public board meeting, which was on the 8th of November. Can I just check whether anybody's got any comments on the minutes of that meeting that they wanted to arise? No. Or whether there's any, I think the matters arising are all closed. If there's anything else anybody wants to say, I think that's fine. Okay, Michael, I bought you 1 extra minute before we get into your report. So over to you.
Fine. So paper's been circulated, and very happy to answer any questions that board members might have on the issues covered. Took some time just to focus on the status of some of the work priorities in the current business plan, some of which have changed, a couple of which have changed. I thought that would be worth just pulling out a couple of points by way of introduction regarding my report on some of the relationship work that I've been involved in. So recently there was a conference, a rail leadership conference that was convened by Hugh Merriman, who's the rail minister, and was introduced by Secretary of State as well. It was interesting to hear about some of the initiatives that are being taken forward in the rail industry on a whole range of fronts. Probably the most significant takeaway for me from the presentations that were given was the one that related to an audit that has been carried out on behalf of the Department of Transport and the Great British Railway Transition Team on accessibility across all of the 2,500 approximately stations in the UK. What emerged from that is that none of those stations are currently what anyone would deem to be fully accessible. Apparently, the audit kind of assessed the state of accessibility against a set of 11 what they call disabled persona, which I imagine means that there were certain characteristics for different parts of the disabled passenger community which they tested for. And I think the audit revealed that about a fifth of the stations were not accessible for at least 10 out of the 11 persona that we used as part of the exercise. And some of those stations that didn't feature so well were at the larger end of the industry, not just at the smaller end. Board members may recall that we had a presentation. It was actually just before I formally joined in November, late November 2022. We had a presentation from the GBR transition team around the work that was in hand at that stage. And I think for us, re-engaging with the team on this particular audit will be really helpful when it comes to one of the aspects of our business plan work around what we can do on accessibility as part not least of the follow-up to the ticket office closure consultations which took place last year. The other thing for me to highlight from the report was the meeting I had with senior folk at TfL on the customer side of Transport for London's team. So I met Emma Strain and Mark Evers, and it was by and large a sort of introductory conversation, but it teed up some of the discussions which we already have planned around Transport for London's customer strategy and how that is panning out. The discussion was very, very helpful. I think there was a kind of shared recognition of our role as a critical friend to TfL. And I made the point that there will be times in our relationship when TfL may hear us more as critic rather than necessarily as friend. where that's appropriate, but that was recognised as, you know, completely legitimate part of our role. We also talked about the way that Transport for London's engagement with stakeholders and the public is perceived, and I think there was some recognition on the part of the TfL team that sometimes that engagement to the stakeholders can feel less than fulsome and genuine, and rather more like window dressing. But equally, the team were at pains to say that in their view, that they felt that there were genuinely good examples of good engagement. They referred to the recent consultation which preceded the announcement about renamed London Overground lines. But they also talked about the work that was behind, the co-creation that was behind, as they put it, the recent Equity in Motion strategy, which was published, an update on which was published recently. We also talked a little bit about the customer strategy, but we will have a fuller discussion about that with some of the TfL team in April. So I thought I'd just pluck out those two bits of engagement that were referred to in the report, but happy to take any other questions, comments.
I have two questions about the accessibility
Mm.
audits. First one is, did they look at the stations only, or the space outside the stations, like how you enter and exit a station? And the second question is, were they only looking at physical access needs, or did they consider neurodiversity?
I don't know the answer to the first one. I don't know how broadly they defined the station estate that they were looking at. With regard to the second, I think we all need to find out more about, you know, what was covered, but I would be very surprised if they didn't include consideration of neurodiversity issues as well. I'd be really surprised at that. But as I said, I think we need to follow up with them to find out more. On the day, it was a fairly quick presentation, useful one, but we need to understand a bit more of the substance of that audit.
Good question, Susan.
Yeah.
Usually when they do these sort of surveys, it's street to train and street to platform. There's usually two. You can't get to the train, then it doesn't matter if they're things aside. So that's how it's usually carried out.
Thanks.
I just wondered, sorry, Alex, I might have teed this up beforehand and should have, whether you might, Michael was talking a little bit about rail reform. You might just want to say a little bit about the consultation on the bill and the work that we're doing on a TravelWatch response to the consultation. Sorry for not having looked up, but I think that in rail reform is such a hot topic right now. And Michael mentioned the seminar with stakeholders. Just say a little bit about where we are on that.
Yeah, sure. So I don't know how familiar everyone is, but the Department for Transport have published their draft rail reform bill, and it's going through pre-legislative scrutiny with the Transport Select Committee at the moment. So they've done a call for evidence, which we've drafted something and just polishing that off at the moment. As a bit of legislation, it's quite, I think, just very much focusing on the practical kind of setting up this integrated rail body, which would kind of oversee everything, bringing in franchising and strategy and all that sort of thing, as part of their aim to sort of have one guiding mind, which is something that we generally do support. But I think this is very much the initial stages. So the substance of what they do and all that sort of stuff, I think that we further down the line, although obviously you can still push for those things now anyway. Never hurts to remind them. There is also a small some changes directly related to London TravelWatch within there. Most of them are just kind of tidying up legislation to reflect sort of the changes. But there will be a few sort of small tweaks to our powers, so just kind of who we can refer things to and issues to. At the moment it's generally the Secretary of State, but that would wind it out. So that's generally positive, but nothing kind of really dramatic or existential in there. That I can see. Meeting with a couple people from the DfT later today as well, just to discuss some of that in a bit more detail. But yes, we'll be polishing that up and then sending that off. We've also spoken a bit to Transport Focus about it, so obviously it will probably impact them in a similar way. But yes, so we sort of the start of the engagement process. I think obviously it's going to be quite a long journey to get it passed if there is legislative time for it. But obviously, as Trish said, really big change in sort of the industry, so definitely important to keep pushing on that.
Yeah.
I don't see anything in particular. Any questions?
Is there any particular alarms of what you've seen so far that kind of do give you concern, or?
I don't think at the moment there is anything, but again, I think a lot of it will come sort of further down the line. I think at the moment it's just kind of the technical, okay, this bill will give the Secretary of State the power to set up the body and give them the powers, but it kind of doesn't set sort of strategic objectives or kind of more detailed workings of that, if that makes sense. But I mean, it's very much something that I think we'll kind of want to keep watching. And again, we're kind of in our response really emphasizing the need to put passengers at the heart of kind of what this body does. So hopefully that will be built into it. But yeah, I think at this stage it's fairly uncontroversial.
Okay.
Although I don't know if anyone would like to disagree with that.
And I totally agree. And I think that's, I mean, from my perspective, and Michael too has some history here, in the lived experience of having been through cycles of rail reform before, is that there's a risk that it becomes tremendously inward focused. So we think a lot about the dynamics of the different players in the industry and who has contracts with who and what the fault allocation process is and how the money flows. And these are always big, complicated questions. But I think London TravelWatch and Transport Focus are here to keep the government's feet to the fire in thinking about this from the consumer perspective. So I think for now, it's about the opportunity of not getting so tied up in the mechanics. I don't know whether you that had shared that experience, that we sort of slightly lose sight of the point, which I think has been a feature of some previous attempts to do stuff in this particular sector. Priya.
Thank you for that, Alex. Just a quick one. I think you mentioned there might be a small change to London TravelWatch's role. Could you just highlight what that might be?
So it's not to the role per se, but just kind of some very small sort of things in how we can do it. So I think, for example, if there's a moment we think there's a breach of a franchising or license agreement, we refer it to the Secretary of State. This would widen it out, so we could also refer it to the ORR, for example. So it just kind of gives a little bit more flexibility there, which I think is not a bad thing. We can kind of judge who we think is most appropriate. I think that's like generally the sort of main thing. There's a few sort of things around record keeping and sort of public account sort of thing, but nothing that would kind of really impact kind of what we actually do, if that makes sense. So again, it seems very I think some of it's just changing legislation to update the new reflect the new legislation. So I don't think there's anything major.
Right.
But obviously if that
Thank you.
changes, I will keep you in the loop.
I wonder, Alex, whether what we might do is send round to board members when we do send our comments in. So
Yeah.
just to copy board members
Yeah.
in with that, just for
Yeah.
information.
Absolutely.
Because then that'll be a help for the next day. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments to Michael, either on rail reform or anything else in his report? Thank you very much, Michael. I wonder whether actually what I might
Yes.
do then is loop back to the terrible sharing today. Coming out of your report and reminding us about the discussions we've had with the rail transition team as well as the customer team at TfL, one of the documents that you've got for this meeting today is our new governance timetable, and which I'm just checking everybody's happy with. But also coming out of Michael's report, I think there's a specific question around whether there are particular stakeholders that Michael's been talking about or big policy issues that would be useful for us to build into our meetings for the rest of the year. So you'll see from the timeline when our public meetings and our member events are there things that you've heard from Michael or people that Michael is talking to that you as a board would like us to invite into our meetings and to give us further briefings on some of these topics. So for example, would it be good to have somebody from the rail reform team come back and give us an update?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Any other bids for externals to come and engage with our board?
And if not now, then please,
Yeah,
you know,
when-
please let us know
I can't remember
offline.
the last time the customer team at TfL came in, they used to give their sort of annual updates. That could be a useful one to slot in somewhere. I know you see them obviously, but
Yeah,
Yeah. So if you can
it's a good mechanism for
Yeah.
questions.
yeah,
let us know if you're happy with the timetable. if you're happy with the timeline and the process for the rest of the year, then do think about, particularly once we've been through the rest of this meeting, if there are particular people you'd like us to bring into the room. And I think customer team at TfL is a really good example of that.
Yeah, I shout out to Eloise for putting together
Yeah.
this note of what what we were trying to do was, I think, a number of things. One is it just from an internal point of view, having a useful kind of business management tool in terms of how, what is it we're going to come to the board to talk about, some of which is just kind of part of the regular cycle. So a lot of stuff around financial planning, for example. But I just say this is a spur for us to think about, okay, so if we've got 6 meetings in the year, who might we want to invite when, particularly for those external sessions. So please do let us know if you've got any thoughts on that. I mean, we'll do some thinking as well, obviously, and we'll come back to the board with any ideas, but happy to have any other suggestions.
I'm not seeing anybody rushing now, but do have a bit of think and come back to us. That would be excellent. All right, thank you very much indeed, Michael. So then that takes us on to Susan, casework report.
Thank you very much. We're back to preempt. So this isn't obviously the regular report that I usually do, because it's not the end of quarter. So this was just something I put together for London TravelWatch. I did something similar for Transport Focus, just to show where we are. There's a very little paragraph in there about the new outsource provider, and it doesn't really do justice to the amount running around I've been doing for the last month on this, or the last few months, but particularly the last month. But just to update, so we're going live on Tuesday. I will be going up on Bank Holiday Monday, so I'll be there first thing in the morning with them on Tuesday with Linda from Transport Focus, and I'll be with them all week to get them over the first hump. My colleague Fazer is currently training them on, well, she's not actually training them, she's watching them using the CRM live. So they've started taking actual live cases now, but with somebody overseeing that. Yeah, I mean, I think we're as good to go as well. We had a bit of a hiccup this morning where we couldn't get the CRM to work, but it's working now. So yeah, very, very happy about that. But once this is, it's not going to be over for a while, but once it's kind of behind me and I'm moving on, one of the things I want to look at with Transport Focus is changing our surveys. We won't be sending a survey out in April because it's just too much for them to understand. So we'll pick that up again probably in May or June. And in the meantime, I'd like to update that and change that so it better reflects. We just ask different questions. And I'm thinking, well, you could see from the end of this report, I think there are some areas that we spend a lot of time explaining why we can't help, and then explaining again and explaining again. I think there may be something we can do at the outset to stop. I mean, it will never stop it, but we might be able to reduce that contact by being clearer about our limitations at the outset, particularly around revenue protection. It is difficult. I was talking to the ORR the other day, and I was saying the difficulty with health affairs is not, we're not the official appeals body for it. We shouldn't really have that much to do with it, but there is nowhere else at all passengers can go to just speak to somebody and ask questions. So that's why people end up with us. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been interviewing with Transport Focus for the independent appeal panel members for the railway. That's an easy to say, isn't it? So the DfT asked Transport Focus and London TravelWatch to interview independent appeal panel members, so to make sure it was very fair and transparent. So we did that, and then the week after I'm back from Stratford, I'll be going into London to train them. Obviously from the passenger perspective, so they don't all get just what the policy is. So that should be quite interesting as well. But it's any questions?
I mean, you've presented with great poise, a heck of a lot of work. So kind of a big big well done.
Thank you.
And I mean, and the fact that you're traveling up on a bank holiday to be there, and I think that says a lot about the personal commitment that you brought to getting this ready for Tuesday. And I think we all we have fingers and toes crossed that there are no unpleasant surprises. I mean, has anything surprised you, any either good or bad, as you've been going through the run up?
I think just from speaking to Foundera, who is the name of the new provider, they've said that usually people will come in the week before, give them a whole load of information and then expect them to start. And I'm just thinking, why would you treat customers like that? You know, surely it's important that they have as much knowledge as we can give them to be able to represent the people that we're representing. So I thought that was quite odd that particularly as they're kind of their customer based as well. So I thought that was it was very gratifying to know we were doing the right thing, but at the same time that did surprise me. Surprised me how much I know about tech that I never want to know again. Yeah, it's just, you know, we're a very small organisation, and it's that's come with its own challenges. But it's not forever. I mean, the current providers have been with us for, I think, 12 years, maybe just under 12 years. And obviously they've done very, very well. And I know that this time next year I'll be having a completely different conversation, but it's just getting there, you know. It takes about 3 months for an outsourced provider to be able to kind of operate under business as usual, apart from the questions that, you know, surprise us all. It takes about 6 months to train a caseworker properly, so that kind of makes sense. But I'll go up every month, probably the next 6 months, just overnight, just to see how they go. And also, of course, I can monitor everything they do from my laptop, so and that's fine. If we find that they do need more support, either I'll go back or one of my caseworkers will go back up. But we should be able to do, once the first week is over, we should be able to do everything remotely, because every time they touch the CRM, I can see what they're doing. So, but obviously I don't spend all my time watching what they're doing. So, that's it. Yeah.
Priya, I was expecting you to come in at this point. So over to you.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to say that this has been in the works for a while, in the background. So thank you, Susan and Linda, for all your work on this and taking time out of your day job to kind of go through the whole procurement and evaluation. And as you said, the previous supplier has been there for 12 years. So there will be a lot of training required to build the confidence and the credibility for our new supplier. And really appreciate you going down there and spending more face-to-face time with them. So yeah, no, just wanted to say huge congratulations. It's coming to fruition and good luck. I hope everything goes well next week.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Priya.
Michael.
Just very briefly, I mean, absolutely, you know, endorse the big thanks to Susan, who has been on this for a while, together with the team. As part of what happens after we go live next week, I think we're already planning a date when both myself and Alex at Transport Focus will go up to the contact centre and just have a look once they've had a chance to get their feet under the desk, as it were, in anger, in real time, rather than in shadow form. So that will come. I think it's due in the next couple of months. We'll go up there and have a look.
And I don't want to create an industry, but I would be quite interested in going at some point.
Please.
And I wonder whether if any of the board members would be interested in coming along.
Priya's up for it.
Priya, should we? I mean, once you're happy that it's the right time, Susan.
Yeah.
But I would certainly. This is a really important part of our operation, and I would love to come and see it in action. And Priya, if you'd like to come too, that'd be excellent.
Yes, absolutely. And just hear firsthand the kind of queries customers have, listening to calls. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Just let us know. Yeah.
Can I also mention that Luke's been fantastic. He's organised all the telephone connections to the switch from where they're going now to somewhere else. And we're also having what do you call it, picture poster? What would you call it? Sign. Thank you. With both organisational names, and so the team have got something they can see what they're visually see what they're representing, because up there that every organisation they represent, they've got something on the wall or on shelves that So the people that their staff can actually physically see.
And is your sense they will have a fairly stable workforce? I mean, the people that we've got working with us now, they will stay with us for a while.
Oh, well, you never
never-
know.
yeah.
You know, there's three young guys who will be doing the work. You never know, but I've given them so many training documents that if anybody changes in and out now, they'll be able to pick that up themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, and loads of like lookups. So you know, rather than contacting us constantly to say, how do I do this? They've got lots of lookups that they can follow through as well.
Great. So is that like any other questions or comments either on the change provider or on anything else in, as you say, the 2-month report? I like the stories at the end. I think that was very helpful. I was a bit sad that in the very final paragraph had the word corrupt in it. That was but it does give a really clear sense of the challenges that you face given what you can and can't do. I thought it was very helpful to bring that to life.
Yeah, we had to be with us, and we had a case yesterday I was speaking to. I had to hand it to my senior caseworker. It took her an hour to read it. It took her 20 minutes talking to me about it. And then we still had to go back to the passenger, and that's one case. So in the end, it took nearly 3 hours to get to a place where we think we know what the next step is. It's just, and they're not all like that, obviously, but they you know, it is difficult. We do have a lot of cases coming in at the moment, and when we're out, you know, just for one case, trying to work out what the problem is, and there is a problem, so we definitely need to be supporting the passenger. But yeah, it does. Then that kind of thing then creates a backlog.
Great.
I think the other thing from my perspective, I didn't know about Dial a Ride.
Okay.
So I, you know,
Right.
when I saw that, I kind of, what's that? And you know, it wasn't something I was aware of. So that was really useful as well in terms of helping to educate. So it's good.
By Mags, she's a senior caseworker, she tends to lead on that. She has very regular meetings because of it's a mode of transport where people are very vulnerable. So it's the one mode of the TfL where we're constantly in contact with them, just to make sure, just to get their updates as well.
Yeah. And without distracting the conversation, I mean, there's a lot of political attention at the minute on the quality of service in Dial a Ride, so it does keep coming up as being an issue right now. Thank you. Okay, well, listen, well done again. We've all got our fingers crossed for next week, but we don't need to have our fingers crossed because the plans are so well made, and we know that you'll be up there in person for day one. So really interested to know how it goes, and thank you so much for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Brill. Thank you. So that takes us on to campaigns and advocacy, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll take the report as read, but just a couple of things to pick up on in particular. So first is the bus research that we've been doing, which I mentioned here. So the field work on that is all now complete. So we're just waiting for kind of top lines and analysis literally any day now. So very much looking forward to receiving that, but some sort of the early insights. I think nothing hugely surprising. Obviously, you know, affordability is important, but also things like reliability is actually going to turn out. That's really important. But some interesting thoughts and suggestions around how people want to improve bus services, kind of what their priorities, and some definitely some food for thought there. So we'll be going over that once we get it, which should be shortly. With a view to kind of bringing all of the different bus strands, so that discussions with Borough, discussions with TfL together, and kind of do sort of report almost like a sort of state of the nation, and just kind of setting the scene and kind of aiming all the aims that we want to going ahead. So looking forward to receiving that. The other thing just to note is that I think at the last board meeting we discussed the GLA Transport Committee had provisionally asked us to speak at their future trends in transport session. Unfortunately, in the end, we weren't on the panelists just because they had so many people say yes to them, and we've obviously spoken in front of them quite a few times now. But still good to be thought of, and we were able to feed into sort of some of their initial thoughts. But I am also arranging a meeting with them or their team in the coming weeks during the pre-election period, because obviously they'll want to hit the ground running post-election, and I think they're really keen to kind of just sort of get our thoughts or potentially what they could be looking at for the next year. So I think that's a really good opportunity to just kind of raise some of our particular priorities, or kind of what passengers are really interested in at the moment. So yeah, open to kind of thoughts on that, but otherwise got many things I can go to them. But yeah, I think just again kind of highlights, I think we've built up quite a good relationship with them, that kind of we're able to have those conversations. So yes, that's the two main things from me. Also mentioned the draft rail reform bill already, but I don't know if anyone has any questions or thoughts.
There's a lot in here, Alex. Laura.
Oh, there is a lot. Thank you for a comprehensive report. Was just a quick question about the wrap-up session with DFT on the ticket office consultations, and how helpful that was, how responsive they were, a bit of a sense of how that went. Be helpful.
It was helpful. It was useful, and I think they were. So it was relatively working level sort of conversation. So I think they were quite receptive to things, and lots of discussions around what worked so well, what I think maybe didn't work so well. I think we did kind of discuss some of the issues with the process itself, how it's set out, and kind of, you know, does this work? You know, maybe if this Schedule 17 worked when it's, you know, a few stations at a time, but when it's that scale, it doesn't quite work, and those sorts of issues, which I think they did seem receptive to and interested in. But I think there is a big question of if there's any willpower at the moment to actually go and make those changes to the more formal process, which requires quite a lot of work. So I think sort of a question mark there, something we can kind of pick up in future. But I mean, I don't imagine they'll be doing this process again anytime soon. Yes. But there were also a few points. So didn't mention here, but some of the sort of more practical things that came out of ticket offices. So for example, trialing welcome points at stations to help with those things. They are picking them up.
Okay.
We train companies, so we're kind of having conversations with them still about that. So I think movement on some things like that, but on the sort of bigger questions, maybe not at the moment.
Although, Alex, I mean, we talked earlier in the meeting about the fact that there's a draft bill on rail reform knocking around, which is out for pre-legislative scrutiny. So, I mean, subject to what happens in the election, there will be a rail bill of some kind, which doesn't come around that often. I suppose that it might be that it would be a shame to, if there are a relatively small number of clauses that would make everybody's lives a lot easier in the future, if they could be tacked onto the wider rail bill, that might, because otherwise it's not going to come along for another generation, is it? I don't know.
No,
Depends on how, I don't have a sense of how much legislating needs to be done.
I mean, I think it's a good question. I don't think necessarily all of it needs to be through legislation with regards to the ticket offices, but I think it does seem like a good opportunity, because obviously, or there'll be some other bodies that are, so for example, a lot of the stuff is with the RDG, how will they interplay with the new integrated rail body? If they're making changes there, it makes sense, as you say, to kind of make all the other changes as well. I'm not sure how much legislative time is, but I don't think it's something that's going away anytime soon.
But we can reflect on that, but I think the arrangements by which the process is carried out, I think that's it's covered outside statutes. It's not something that's embedded in statutes. It's through formal industry agreements, and as you say, the game is with RDG and the industry rather than that. But let's have a think about whether it would make sense to use this opportunity, as you say, because it's not going to come around any other time soon.
As a bill manager, I would have been horrified to hear
Of course,
saying,
you've been discouraging us from.
I thought it was positive in terms of the reaction to the personal security point. I thought that's really great to kind of hear. You've mentioned in there about sort of the long-term sort of support and implementation of that, and that they're looking for our kind of support. Do you get any sense of timings of how, you know, how much any of that can be done? Or
it's a good question. I think I mean, part of it I think is very dependent on the train company or TfL, and also which sort of the recommendations. I think some of them are quicker and easier to implement. I think unsurprisingly, anything that costs money is much more of a kind of sticking point, just because kind of funds are tight at the moment. Some of them have actually, might come on to this later, some of them have actually said it would be useful to kind of show how much potentially money they're missing out on, or revenues they're missing out on, because of personal security issues, to kind of help them build that case for more funding to do those things. And I think it will be tricky to get some of the recommendations kind of fully implemented unless they get that funding. But I mean, yeah, as I said, I think there's lots of things that they can do quite quickly and easily. And at the moment, one of the things that's come out of the conversations that we've had so far is there does seem to be interest, but not necessarily kind of awareness of the best way to do it, or if there's already sort of a scheme that's going on that is working successfully, or a campaign, you know, there's no point duplicating things. Can they just kind of work together? So I think we're kind of trying to join links where they are, particularly between TfL and train companies. I think TfL have done a lot of really positive work on this already. So it's, can we kind of share the learnings instead of kind of start from scratch? So I think if that kind of goes well, that would probably speed up their food things.
And I think this is a general point, not reflective of the kind of the parties involved, but my concern would be that it's lip service, that they're going, yeah, and then actually, you know, what we're keen to see is the action. But as I say, that's more of a skeptical point, you know, more generally made than actually necessarily with the parties involved.
I mean, I do think it is a very valid point, and I should say we've had some really good engagement with quite a few companies, but there are also others that, you know, just, I don't think it's particularly high up on their agenda. But I think over the next year, I think we just want to keep the pressure up so that they can't just kind of let it slide on.
Well, it's just such an important point, isn't it, for customers? So yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to echo Susan's praise on the wide reach and impact of the personal security work. It would be great to keep in touch with you about the Women's Safety Project and working on TfL. So you're producing like actionable materials that anyone ideally should be able to pick up and use to identify and improve safety issues. The other thing I was going to ask you about, which I don't think is mentioned in this report, so it must have been one of your weekly emails. I think you were on television recently about fare evasion. And I was just wondering if you could say more about what the issues were and what TravelWatch's response was.
Yeah, so it was just I mean, I think I was on it for like 5 seconds classic.
I think there's a picture in the report that Luke did. That's probably what's triggered the thought.
Yeah. Thanks, Luke. But it was just around must be a couple months ago now. There's sort of an annual figure of how much fares TfL are losing from fare evasion. I mean, obviously we're kind of anti-fare evasion because that means other people are having to pick up those costs. They increased the penalty fare earlier this year, I think, to £100, but I think we're kind of saying there's no point doing that if you're not actually enforcing it. So that's kind of the main message, is make sure kind of it's out there and enforcing it. I mean, the flip side of that is also kind of trying to keep travel as affordable as you can, and particularly obviously in a cost of living crisis. So, you know, transport is so essential that you want to make sure people can access it, but you know, that doesn't mean that they can't or shouldn't pay their fare. But yeah, I think it was a fairly no tricky questions there from them, but just fairly straightforward on fare evasion. Thanks.
Other questions for Alex? I've got a couple. So I thought it was really cheering report. And I was particularly cheered to see the report exit from the ticket office as well.
Yes. So
the variety of different things covered in the report was kind of really cheering. I think both my questions reflect kind of what I do with my life when I'm not here. So it was on buses. Great to see we're going on buses. Are you linking up with Transport Focus on comparing and contrasting what they find in their bus work and bringing that into our work? And then on security, kind of similarly, a big focus of the work for British Transport Police, particularly in London, is dealing with robbery and industrialised fare evasion. Is there something I can do to help you build a bit of a loop into them? Because I think they would be very interested in working with you.
On the first question around Transport Focus and your bus journey, yes, so we're setting up a meeting with David just to have a bit of debrief. They also, I don't know if you've gone into detail, they did for a couple of the areas, they kind of overlapped with some TfL services, so they did pick up some TfL services in that. So it'd be interesting to get that data. Relatively small numbers, so it's not kind of included in the full published data, but I think it'd be useful to kind of use to help bridge sort of comparisons, because obviously they'll have a slightly different methodology to kind of TfL's numbers, all that sort of thing. So if we can kind of, I guess, almost use that as a benchmark. But yes, meeting with them, really great bit of work, as you said. So really interested to kind of see where we might kind of align or work together on things. And BTP, absolutely, yes, we're very, very keen for that. We've had some conversations with them on personal security, often via TfL, because obviously they work very closely. But yeah, always very keen to have that. And I think there's maybe been a bit of movement around there at the moment. So
yeah, they've hired they've put somebody called Sean O'Callaghan, I think, who's now in charge of pull together as a project their work on personal security. So I will loop you together.
thank you.
Yeah,
Great.
I'll loop you together. Do it now. Yeah. Great. Any other questions or comments for Alex? No, okay. Luke, you're not on camera,
I'm
but,
not on camera.
can I just say first, thank you very much, because as we discussed earlier, we're without a head of communications right now, so thank you very much for the report and for everything that you're doing.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's just a quick sort of summary. Maybe not as comprehensive as might be in the past. We've got the skills of this moment, but so in terms of coverage, we've got quite a good coverage over the past few months. We got in places that we're not in as regular, so the sun, which has got a really wide circulation, we've got in that. I think that was around the Stansted issue around contactless not being able to be used to get to the airport once you get there, sort of thing, you get prepared. And then a lot of like local press as well, sort of thing. I think that might be around you, Trisha, sort of thing, or you starting in the role. Social media, had a few sort of okay tweets. First one was probably the best. Someone on that list is Candy Gray Thompson retweeting. That was a bit of a back of the net moment. And then website again is doing well as it has been sort of things since we switched over from our old provider to the new guys. So we've been over with them for I think over a year now, and traffic continues to go up, and we notice it specifically on certain pages around like consumer information focused around like strikes and Easter travel and things like that. So that's what really generates it up, and we get the guys in a few weeks to talk about how we can improve the sort of look at the site and make it a bit more user friendly, because it's the template is what we've got from Transport Focus and sort of together the sort of like fit to our needs, but I think there's a lot more potential and more we can do, particularly around casework as well. So there's that. And yeah, that's that. Any questions?
It's a great picture, Alex. It's got a bus in it. It's got London TravelWatch. That should be a poster. Okay with that. I mean, just before I open it up, and this is probably an unfair question, but I'll ask it anyway. I mean, the thing I struggled from the numbers to work out. There was a thing that we were trying to achieve of keeping with us all the people that I've got to know as fire ticket officers. I mean, is your sense that we're managing to do that through what we're doing now, or are we keeping is the show rolling forward?
Potentially. The other thing we do, which we haven't sent out for a while, is send out an email sort of thing to like a subscriber list, and I've noticed that the numbers on that continue to go up at a higher level than they were pre the TikTok's consultation. So maybe our name's out there more or things like that, but there's signs like that. Twitter followers being up, traffic to the site. So yeah, I feel like the impact stuff in terms of getting hold of their people and like actually saying, oh, join our community or anything like that around this whole issue around GDPR and data protection that makes it a bit difficult to do things like that. So,
And then, sorry, just one more for me. I can't say, I'm just trying to connect. So, and I was just thinking about the board, us as a board. Are we all have our individual networks, and one thing that we did this month was we kind of amplified each other's content a little bit in one or two places. And that made me ask the question whether we're doing that systematically enough, or whether there's more that we can do as a board to play in our individual networks to make sure that we get London TravelWatch messages to our people that we know. So on moments where we're doing significant communications, just making sure that the individual board members know and then can play that out through their own Twitter or LinkedIn. Would be a good thing to do. Yeah. Did you get all the people you needed for your?
I did,
you
thank
get
you.
good. Excellent. Any other questions on communications or comments on the report?
Just a couple of bits
Yeah.
of gloss from me. First, the report refers to the story around contactless payment to Stansted and the confusing situation for passengers. Just to demonstrate the power of getting our voice out there. The coverage and our quotes kind of prompted contact by the rail operator to me saying, "Oh, we'll see you've been commenting," and there was then a fairly lengthy exposition about all the kind of mitigating measures that they've got in place to make sure people, you know, have the information to know about, you know, whether or not, you know, what, you know, the status of contactless payment. And I simply went back and I said, that's all great, but, you know, just do the right thing and make it simple for people in the way that, you know, it's simple in Gatwick or the other London airports. The conversation stopped there. There was a sense of, well, yeah, we understand the point. It'll cost money. It's complicated. I'm like, yeah, I hear you, but
yeah.
The other thing to mention with regard to the website, Luke and I are going to be meeting our website providers in the next couple of weeks, just to hear their ideas on, you know, what more we can do to improve the quality of the experience of the website. I think it's in a better place than it was in the not so distant past, but it's probably not always the easiest to navigate in terms of the information that's there. So we'll just have a non-committal conversation at this stage about, well, what more can we do to make it easier and better for people to use?
Thank you. Any other thoughts on comms? Priya.
Hi, thank you. Michael, just on the website point, I wondered if we did embark on a journey to make some changes on our website. At that point, it might be good to involve some real customers and then do some co-design of human-centered principles and ensuring that flows through our website. That might be something to think of. I'm sure you probably have already.
That's definitely the plan. Once we've got some ideas, then to kind of road test them. Yeah, might even involve some board members as guinea pigs. Subject to your diaries and commitments.
I'm sure board members would be very happy. Yeah, I mean, I was slightly tempted at that point to go through a conversation of, are we clear what people are using our website for? What are the balance? I mean, but then I suddenly realised that we had 2 minutes, so I probably shouldn't. but it might be that if you want 1 or 2 board members to be part of that conversation, that we should take that as a separate discussion. Thank you very much, Priya. Thank you. I mean, this is it's nice to see that we're as a resident of South West London. I was glad to see that Twickenham Hub had picked up what we're doing, but the reach is impressive. The reach is impressive. So well done. Thank you very much, Luke. Right. That I think takes us to the end of reports. I think we're just about to go into finance, but do I need to talk very slowly to give you
no, this is still public.
It's
about bringing in Shahid.
It's Shahid with us. That was my my question. You must even say, surely you can't be running to time. Unusually. Right. Do you know when the London Society is going to publish its headline capturing 1-to-1?
Yeah, no.
No, I don't. Ever. we're definitely getting reach in new places. I was doing my volunteering job last weekend. I work in a English heritage property, and somebody came up to me and said, you work with London TravelWatch. I wrote to them about ticket offices. And they did what I asked them to, which for a random person that I met during a volunteering job was amazing. It was very nice to hear.
It's good brand awareness.
A very good brand awareness.
And you soon shut down.
Wow.
Everyone.
Also, as you said, he's always early, isn't he? We're usually always
Yes.
late.
Yeah, exactly.
I learned from the last time I didn't allow enough time for this part of the agenda, so I thought we'll make sure we do this time.
Spot on.
It's good.
Mhm.
And how is this? I'm going to keep going on communication. How is our so given that obviously there's Perda right now, presumably that will mean that it's generally a less noisy environment over the next few weeks.
Ultra cautious.
Ultra cautious, yeah.
They clear anything.
Yeah.
Like the condition of safety taking side of it.
Perda pre-election
Yeah,
period.
pre-election period, yeah.
Apologies, yes.
So, I mean, there's certainly, there are certainly pronouncements and announcements being made by candidates
Yeah.
around issues that, you know, are in our kind of remit on transport in the capital. But in terms
Yeah.
of our activity, the level goes right down.
So things like that video with the New York subway background instead of London that the Tory candidates put out, that's something that TravelWatch would not comment on, would be asked to comment on.
No, we wouldn't comment on that. And I think, I mean, I'm sure board members are aware of it, but I think the same kind of guidance applies as much to yourselves as to us as the exec team. We do need to be, you know, observe complete party neutrality on these issues at this time.
Yes. Shahid, welcome.
Hello, hi. So sorry I'm late. I was the computer wanted to do a Zoom update, so apologies for that.
You're like 1 minute late, so I think we can hardly
Yeah.
catch up. So you're here we've got 2 finance items to cover before our break. So we've got the regular finance report, and then we've got our budget for next year. So do you want to start with this year? Thank you.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Yeah, so this report covers the period up until the end of February, so almost at year end. Things are kind of looking okay in terms of income. We've now received all the income we're expecting from the GLA, which is just sort of profiling that monthly, so nothing to worry about there. We have an additional line item in here in this report for a rent deposit that we are holding for at Europoint. It's something that we weren't aware of until the last couple of months. So basically the deposit that we've got with the landlords has been accruing interest. We found out about this when we renewed the lease. So there's £3,000 that was being accrued in the 5-year period today. That is showing on the income statement, but we've adjusted it on the balance sheet. So the rent deposit has been adjusted for that amount. So it's not something that's available to spend in year. It's more just there for information, really. In terms of costs, we are sort of there's been quite a few sort of underspends and overspends over the course of the year, but the net effect is a total of, sorry, I just lost my thing. Yeah, we've managed to put more money back into reserves than we expected. So the closing balance we're expecting now is 179,000. That is largely made up of projects not sort of being completed as we initially anticipated. So, for example, the ticket office closure was considerably lower than what we had budgeted. The public transport better deal didn't go ahead. The ULEZ package didn't get completed in the year. Complaint handling reform didn't get completed in the year, and neither did stakeholder management, stakeholder engagement. Sorry. So the total general reserve, the forecast general reserve at the end of the year is 179,000.
And just before I open it out to other people, I'm just remembering that Michael, went to the Assembly and asked them for agreement that we hold the underspend this year as reserve and talked about it for next year. How does that 179,000 compare with what we thought we would be holding over when we went to see the Assembly in December?
From memory, it's a larger amount than when we went to the Assembly, but I think we had established a very clear agreement that whatever the amount, we should be able to use that amongst other things to build up our reserves over time to a more sustainable level than hitherto has been the case, and that level is in the region of 250,000 pounds. So we're still well short of that. And actually, when we come to talk about next year's budget, we would use a significant element of what will be a year-end reserve then to fund some of our work next year's budget. So that 179 quickly drops down to a forecast next year end surplus of 119,000.
Understood. And obviously it's the 27th of March, so for this year there shouldn't be any further surprises to come. Any questions about this year's position before we move on to next year? So it's a cloud with a silver lining, isn't it, this year? We haven't managed to spend all the money because we've been so preoccupied with doing ticket office work. On the other hand, it gives us more to spend next year, which is helpful.
Yeah, and it's to the extent that it's a shortcoming, it's a right side shortcoming. To better to be that way than to have ended up overspending. However, we're mindful that if we commit to spend money and it is ultimately public money, then we should see through those commitments as far as possible. We should be efficient in delivering the things that we said we're going to spend our money on. So we're in a good place, but we need to try and make sure that for the year that's about to start, once we've allocated, particularly against the project cost items for next year, that we see those things through.
Okay. So shall we move swiftly on to next year? Because obviously that's where the that's at this point in our year more interesting. So back to you, Sheed.
Great, thank you. So for next year, we've had agreement of 1.145 million in terms of the base budget for the year. In addition to that, there is an a 4.5% pay award has been announced, so that will be a further £37,000 that will be used to fund specifically that element of the staff payment award. So in total, we're going to be getting 1.182 million from the GLA. In terms of costs, there is the salaries have gone up in budget. So there's two elements. That one is the 4.5% pay award. The other reason for that is where people have been naturally moved up into the next spinal point. And then fixed overheads is a slight increase in property costs. That is largely to do with business rates and service charges, which is higher than this year. Again, similarly, IT costs are slightly higher than this year. They're a result of software costs being higher than what we budgeted last year. In terms of variable overheads, largely in line with last year. There's a slight decrease in depreciation because we are no longer holding the leasehold improvements, which we originally had for the old lease. And we have £125,000 provisionally allocated for campaigns and projects next year. Taking all that into account, we will need to dip into the reserves for a value of £60,000, as Michael said earlier, which would leave us with a closing reserve balance next year of just shy of 120,000.
Thank you very much. That's very, very clear indeed. Michael, when we get into the question about the business plan for next year, we'll be talking a little bit about the allocation of resources across projects. But is there anything you want to say at this stage around your level of confidence on resourcing for next year? Any particular pressure points? Any thoughts on over programming versus under programming that you want to bring to the board's attention?
I mean, I think I haven't got anything substantial to add other than I think the area you've highlighted around programming and how effectively we're doing that is something we need to be pretty focused on. At this point in the year, as you've noted, the budget doesn't allocate cost to individual projects under the project cost part of it. That will be kind of like an important short-term next thing for us to do, subject to the discussion we're going to have about business plan. But yes, I think we need to make sure that we become more effective in both specifying how much we're going to spend and then actually spending it in year. You'll note from the budget that we are planning on allocating overall to our projects a slightly smaller amount than this year, and that I think partly reflects the experience of our ability to kind of spend against allocation. But it's something we need to be very focused on.
Do we think that the GLA will push back at all on the increase of budget and say dip more into the reserves?
At this stage, I don't think so, because that we had that conversation essentially when we presented to the Transport Committee in December, when we presented the budget, and this budget effective, the headline agreement effectively is reflected in this more detailed look. But I think that doesn't remove the need for us to make sure that we are budgeting and spending efficiently, because at some point I think it would be completely legitimate to expect them to start asking questions about the allocation that they're making for us.
Laura, I was just going to add, but the main increase in staff costs, isn't it, which was signed off separately?
Correct, and one thing that's been very helpful as a result of the conversation between us and the GLA in agreeing our headline award has been an agreement around the mechanics of the allocation for the pay award. In the past, and certainly in the year that's just about to close, that's been less than smooth. There's been a level of uncertainty, although in principle it was always understood that the pay award, which is not in our control, the annual pay award, it's for the GLA to determine. It was always understood in principle that would be funded, but in practice we were waiting until I think quite a late stage in the financial year before those funds were released. I think that bit of process will now be a lot smoother as a result of the clarification we've established with them about what they're prepared to fund.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you. I mean, without getting ahead of ourselves on project costs, and I agree we're not ready to get into the discussion about the allocation of that envelope. I mean, this may be an unfair question for you, but at organisation level, putting aside last year, which was a particularly difficult year, are we good at spending our project allocations, or do we typically come in, as many organisations do, under budget on project spend? And in which case, would there be a logic to doing some over programming?
I think just looking back at the last couple of years, I think we have largely sort of coming sort of fair on target. This year is a bit more of an anomaly. We've never been this far apart. I think that's largely to do with the ticket office closer consultation kind of taking up so much time. But just looking back at the last few years, we have been more in line with what we'd set out.
Yeah, and the ticket office element this year, I think, has had an impact in two ways. One is I mean, basically there was 4 months of our corporate life that were pretty much entirely on that as far as the kind of campaigns and advocacy side of the organisation were concerned. The other is that we, in anticipation of what turned out to be in fact a much bigger exercise, we budgeted very, very generously to spend money on and bringing in additional resource to help us process the consultation responses. And in the end, it turned out that we had been kind of like overly prudent, but that's helpful. It would have been worse if actually we were scrambling around to find money to bring in the additional resource to process all those consultations. That wasn't a problem we had, because actually we've been pretty prudent in making sure we had enough money to fund that. But then the consequence at year end was that we didn't spend a lot of the money that it's £45,000 that we budgeted for that we didn't end up needing to spend.
Okay, thank you. Really clear. Unless there's any other comments or questions, I'll take it. Can I take it that we're approving the financial report?
Yeah.
And we're comfortable with the budget for next year, noting that we still have further work to do on the exact allocation of the project spend envelope. Lovely, thanks very much. So that brings us to the end of our public meeting. I think I need to propose a resolution to move into confidential session under section 15(2)(b) of Schedule 8 of the Great London Authority Act. Thanks very much, Shahid.
Thanks, bye-bye.